bunch of receivers that really weren't getting it done. And Tony Romo, as you mentioned, solid day passing the football today, but it was all about the rushing attack. And then obviously in the receiving game, questionable how Kevin Ogletree only targeted one time, Phil. And then obviously Seattle offensively having more of a rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that game, and it just shows you the emotional roller coaster that will be the Dallas Cowboys this year and every year, I think, as long as Jerry Jones owns this franchise. And, you talk about Kevin Ogletree, and I don't know anyone who thought he was going to go out and have his repeat performance like he did against the Giants. If you watch that game and you really dissect it, you have to know that the Giants were down to their fourth and fifth cornerbacks. So I don't care who the Cowboys' third receiver was in that game. He was more than likely going to have a big day. Nothing against Kevin Ogletree, but don't expect him to be a star emerge like the way Miles Austin did midway through his Dallas career. He is a solid receiver, but there's nothing there that he's going to be able to exploit week in and week out. Up until this season, he'd played for a few years and never had a touchdown pass. So, he's definitely a solid receiver and a good number 3 at that, but you can't expect that from him every week. That's why you have guys. That's why he's a number 3 in the first place, because he doesn't make the plays that your number 2 or number 1 does. So you look at the Cowboys last week, everyone was praising them for being the Giants and that they were going to go on and win the Super Bowl, and now people are questioning if they're even going to make the playoffs. It's just the up and down that the Cowboys tend to bring this time of year.
Obviously disappointing for Dallas, and to go more in depth on this defeat that really has set Dallas in a negative positioning. They're 1-1, 500 on the year, but you can't, to lose to a team like Seattle, you just can't come back. It's hard to come back after that kind of a performance. But Noel Booker is on the line, and Noel, it's nice to see you back for another week. And Noel, what are your thoughts on this demoralizing loss for Dallas, who now faces a 500 track record after week 2, and now has to go right back to the gridiron?
It's what you expect with Tony Romo. One time, in 1 week, it would be amazing, like how he went against the Giants. Then another week he's gonna lose against someone easy. That's how it was for the Falcons last year. But but for Tony Romo and the Cowboys, they just need to bounce off this loss and get set to play. Who do they got next?
Unknown right now, Noel. We'll get to that stat as soon as possible, but Tony Romo, obviously, as you just mentioned, a terrible day at the office. You have average numbers throughout the day, but starting at quarterback, you got to get it done. Just wasn't able to beat the Seahawks today.
You mean yesterday? But yeah. But you know what? I only saw the highlights of that game, and it was a very disappointing loss, 27-7.
To answer the question we had earlier, Noel, they do go to play Tampa next week at home, and we just saw from this past week Tampa was able to hang with the Giants. So that's another game that's not guaranteed. They'll have to bring the game they brought against the Giants, and definitely don't bring the game they brought to Seattle.
Well, for Tampa, they're on and off because when they played against the Giants, they were doing pretty good. They were doing pretty good during the game, and then they just let Eli Manning do whatever he does, with those 500 yards. That'll crush Tampa's defense, which may have an opening to Tony Romo and his passing game.
Yeah, Noel Booker, we'll get to that topic later with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and for Dallas, you could be facing a 1-2 start, and after defeating the New York Giants at home, no one expected this kind of a performance against Seattle. It certainly surprised me. But Noel, what kind of an outlook do you have for the Dallas Cowboys after this kind of a loss following a big win on Thursday Night Football in Week 1?
I think their season is pretty much going to be like a roller coaster. They'll win some key games, but they'll lose some easy games, and they could possibly have at least a 3-game winning streak at one point, and then a 3-game losing streak. So my overall prediction for them is they'll either go 8-8 or 9-7, and they might miss the playoffs. and if they don't miss the playoffs, then they'll get eliminated in the first round.
Interesting prediction, Noel, and obviously you're always welcome onto the show. We're running tight on time right now, Noel. We're sorry we're going to have to let you go. Thank you for your thoughts about the Dallas Cowboys, and Noel, we'll catch you later on. You can call back later on in the show, but right now we're a little squeezed on time. But obviously it just seems like the entire NFC East, Phil, real quick, I mean, all over the entire East. You go from the Washington Redskins, an up-and-down squad. Obviously, Robert Griffin should have some stability, create some there for Washington. And then it just seems like the rest of the East, it's you win one week in fascinating, tremendous fashion. You beat the Giants, Dallas does, then comes back with a team like Seattle and completely stinks it up. The Philadelphia Eagles, they're 2-0, but they are an up and down 2-0, and they could have really, if it weren't for a dropped interception, they could be facing a 1-1 start after losing to the Browns. I mean, an average win against the Browns. We mentioned last week, Vic, 4 interceptions, not going to get it done. They did beat the Ravens. We'll get to that later on in the show. Just the entire NFC East, Phil, it seems like they're up and down all year long. So for Dallas, it's hard to really predict how they'll turn out until later on in the year.
Yeah, I think, as Noel, I could almost agree with him. The 8-8 or 9-7 is pretty realistic for this team because you look at it, they beat teams they should lose to, and they lose to teams they should have won. That seems to be what they do all the time. They do tend to rise to the occasion. They're one of those teams that plays to the level of the team that they are facing, which you can't always do. You have to dictate the talent. You got to say, this is who we are every week, and you have to bring that every week. If you don't, you can definitely jeopardize your season, which is something the Cowboys have done for the past few years. So I could definitely see them missing the playoffs if this continues.
And for Dallas, it's just a matter of how you play at the quarterback position. And if your receivers come to the play, one day it's Kevin Ogletree. This past week, it was Miles Austin who came to the scene, but didn't have enough of an impact for this Dallas Cowboys offense to get anything done. Obviously in that 27-7 loss. It'll be interesting to see how the Cowboys face later on in the year. As NFL Goal Line rolls on, we will be taking a trip over to that big game that the Giants had over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And how are these replacement officials doing in their so far in a lackluster 2-week series over in the regular season? Some questionable calls and some non-calls that have really cost some teams. And is C.J. Spiller the best running back in the NFL? We'll take a quick 30 and be back for more topics around the National Football League. This is the NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. Welcome back to the NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. We are having all hour long, our recaps on the Broncos and the Falcons game. Phil, right out of the break, let's have a quick update. And right before halftime, it looks like the Atlanta Falcons seemingly putting away the Broncos. What do you have for us, Phil?
Well, right now the Falcons lead 20-0. Peyton Manning just threw a strike to the end zone. And it was ruled an incomplete pass, but the booth is under review because it's under the 2 minutes. The Broncos are out of challenges for the course of this game. And it looks like Demaryius Thomas comes down with the ball in the end zone, both feet touching inbounds. So we're waiting for the official decision. It was ruled incomplete, which is the big part, of this. But if this does get reversed, which, from my view and my eyes, it does look like he gets both feet down. So we're either going to go into the halftime. There's only 8 seconds left in the half, with about a 7-20 or a 3-20 lead. Either way, it's looking all Falcons to this point.
And it'll be a second half that Peyton Manning will have to erase the 3 interceptions if the Denver Broncos want to have a chance to go to 2-0. Otherwise, it'll be the San Diego Chargers that make their opening statement with a 2-0 start to the year. And it'll be the Chargers after week number 2 leading the division. Now, another team that coming back with a strong win, the New York Giants over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Eli's 510 yards passing. That is tied for 8th on the NFL all-time passing list. And I did not expect Eli Manning to come into this game, even with a new coaching staff and even with a defense that last year was very lackluster in their 10-game losing streak to end the year. I still did not expect Eli to have this kind of a performance. I mean, call me a hater, but Eli, with 3 interceptions, to come back in the second half with nearly 300 yards just in those 2 quarters and rack up 510 on 31 of 51 passing. Just reading off the stat sheet, Hakeem Nicks and Victor Cruz came to play today. And for the New York Giants, now back at 500, how big of a win was this, Phil, for this football team? Obviously, the offense came to play today, and the Tampa Bay defense, you have to be scratching your head on them moving forward.
Well, really quick before I jump into that, the official review has just concluded, and the call was reversed for Denver, and they do have a touchdown. So you're going to go into this half with the Falcons up 20-7. Back to the topic at hand. To me, when I was watching this game, because I had my Eagles game on my laptop and I had the Buccaneers and Giants game on my TV, and I'm watching this game, and to me, it looks like Eli Manning tapped into his inner Brett Favre, if you will, because he just goes out there and he says, I'm just going to fling this all over the yard. Some of them are going to be caught by my guys. Some of them are going to be caught by your guys. But I'm going to keep throwing to keep my team in this game, because there was a point where the Bucs looked like they had this in the bag. So Eli Manning just wanting to put the pressure on him, the run game not exactly working to their benefit. So he said, put the ball in my hands and I will get it done, which explains the 500 yards passing, which they definitely needed because they're throwing for most of this game because they were coming from behind in the majority of this contest.
And for the New York Giants, Eli Manning throws for 510, and you even have a running game. Now, Ahmad Bradshaw, it's questionable to whether he'll be back next week. He obviously suffered a concussion, I believe, in this contest against the Buccaneers. But you do put up 71 yards with their running backs by committee. And then Hakeem Nicks putting up, just reading off the stat sheet, 10 catches, 199 yards. Victor Cruz, 11 for 179, including a long 80-yard touchdown. And then Martellus Bennett comes back after a drop in the end zone with 5 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Phil, this is an offense to reckon with. And even though Tampa Bay, defensively, so much flux, and the coaching staff is just has to come back next week with a better performance. But for the New York Giants, I mean, coming off of a loss like that to Dallas, Tom Coughlin's one of those coaches that will have his team ready to play week in and week out, and certainly they did in this one. How is this offense going to fare moving forward?
Well, it'll definitely be interesting to see. You know, some teams play slugfest, but it turns out in this one, you look at the Giants and the Bucs, you would think it'd be more of a slugfest, but this just turned into a shootout. And this is something that really neither of these teams were prepared for. The Bucs did not think they were going to get in a shootout with the New York Giants, and it was definitely not something that they were looking for, you know, going into this game. So the Giants, definitely a big win. You know, if they go 0-2, then you're starting to get the questions that maybe the Saints are getting, which is something, if we have time, we're going to get to later. But I think they just hit the point where they realized, guys, we cannot go 0-2 if we want this season to go somewhere. Our division is too good, but those guys are too tough to play, regardless of the teams. So really, I think they just had to dig down deep, and you saw a lot of heart in the New York Giants this past weekend.
And for Tom Coughlin to get his first win on this new year, what a monkey off his back after the New York Giants going into this game. It was like, all right, so now for the Giants, they come off of a Super Bowl win, but none of the NFL experts even had them going deep in the playoffs. So now you come back with a big win. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're better than 4-12, the record that they had last year. They're better than that mark. Depending how much better, we'll have to wait and see. But for the Giants to have a comeback like that, they had 28 points on a final 17 minutes of football to the Buccaneers 7. It certainly was a comeback to remember. And right now, for the New York Giants, things are looking good despite being trailing by a game to Philadelphia, now 2-0.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, the NFC East race, it never seems to be over. It tends to come down to the last week or two of the season every year. So really, you just got to, you know, stick with it. You got to, you know, keep your head up and push through the season because these teams are too tough and they know each other too well. You know, most of the time they split series with each other. So any win you can get is always a positive if you're Philadelphia or New York.
Every single win is a positive no matter what team you're playing. For New York, way to come up 500 after week number 2. Same can be said with the Philadelphia Eagles, Phil. Your team with a 1-point win. Again, another 1-point nip of the Baltimore Ravens now. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, with such an impressive win after coming off of 4